So the new generation of motherboards for the Z890 or Intel Core Ultra processors are rolling in for reviews, and today we have ASRock Z890 Steel Legend Wi-Fi. Now, this board in general is quite familiar with you guys, or you are familiar with the Steel Legend series, and what can I say about this board except this one looks quite special in terms of the visual aspect first and foremost, right? Because it's full white. Even the PCB board is white and it looks outstanding just because of it. I mean, I'm really digging the whole white. Look at it. Just look at it. Whole white PCB, and you have some grayish silverish parts, but they're so minimal that you can nicely incorporate it inside the actual full white build, and that's outstanding. So I'm going to pair it up with Intel Core Ultra 9 285K and run some benchmarks to see actually how it compares to the other Z890 that I had for review recently, which will be quite interesting because we have the same processor, but I got a different results, and they are good. They are better, which is a shocker because we're talking about this, well, a different brand, but we're talking about the same chipset. So let's dive into it. But before we go into those benchmarks, let's check out what this motherboard has and just deep dive into it. So it supports Intel Core Ultra processors. We're having 18 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1. This is insane. Power phase design, SPS for V-Core, GT plus SA. After that, we have PCI 5.0 times 16, PCI 4.0 times 16, and PCIe 4.0 times 4 expansion slots. Loads of USB ports, but we'll get to that part later on. It supports also Intel UHD graphic built-in visuals. Graphic outputs, we have one HDMI, two Thunderbolt 4 Type-C, outstanding. For the storage, 4 SATA 3, one Blazing M.2, which is PCIe Gen 5 times 4. Then we have two Hyper M.2, which are PCIe Gen 4 times 4, and one Hyper M.2 PCIe Gen 4 times 4 and SATA 3. For audio, we have 7.1 channel HD audio Realtek ALC 1220 audio codec and HEMIC audio. LAN is Realtek 2.5G LAN. VLAN, we have Intel 802.11b Wi-Fi 7 plus Bluetooth, and of course we have a standard ATX form factor. So some of the key features are dual Thunderbolt 4 Type-C, right? That's quite interesting. We have memory OC Shield, Intel Wi-Fi 7, Realtek ALC 1220 codec. I think I saw that on past motherboards, so this doesn't make too much difference. But we have 20K black caps with 1000 MFD capacitance and USB 3.2 generation 2x2 front Type-C, which is great. Now let's just dive into I/O overview. We have antenna ports, two antenna ports. We have BIOS flashback, HDMI. Then we have two USB 3.2 generation 2, two Thunderbolt 4 Type-C, 2.5G LAN, two USB 2.0, two USB 3.2 generation 1, four USB 3.2 generation 1, microphone out, and SPDIF. Now, this board also features XXL VRM heatsinks, which are really huge in terms of cooling the VRMs, which is great. We have toolless multi-layer M.2 heatsink, and this is quite straightforward and easy. You just have to push that, I would say, a button towards the inner part, towards the actual holder or towards the heatsink, and just pull it upwards. That's it. It's really straight and simple. Then we have 5 chassis fan connectors, which are all supporting smart fan speed control. And at the top right top corner, we have 2 CPU fan connectors with 1 AIO pump connector. It supports DDR5 XMP and Expo, so you're good to go with both. And DDR5 up to 9466 MHz. That's outstanding. I have to admit that's outstanding. I did mention that we have 2 CPU fan connectors, we have 1 AIO pump fan connector, and then we have 5 chassis fan connectors. There's also a thermistor header, which provides an additional source for temperature monitoring, offering customized thermal management solutions, let's put it this way. And of course, we have the fantastic tuning, which you already know in BIOS, that gives you a possibility to auto-detect the minimum duty of each fan with a single click. And of course, one more thing that I have to mention is the BIOS. You have the easy mode where you have the DRAM information, storage configuration, fan status, CPU fan 1 settings, instant flash, fantastic tuning, which I already mentioned for you, and boot priority. Now, with all of these information, you can do some regular stuff. You have also polychrome RGB, English, and advanced mode. Now, in the advanced mode, you have couple of tabs as per usual: main, OC tweaker. Then we have where you could adjust memory profiles, DRAM configuration, CPU configuration, voltage configuration, and stuff like that. In advanced mode, CPU configuration, which gives you information about P cores and E cores. And then we go to tools, where you have LED firmware recovery, ASRock polychrome sync, and other stuff. Hardware monitor is quite straightforward. You already know what that is. Security, boot, and exit, save and exit, which, as I stated, it's really similar to the past generation of their motherboards, so nothing drastically changed. So if you're a ASRock user for their motherboards, you're already good to go with the BIOS. So I think it's time now to stop with these technical specifications and go into benchmarks, because this will be quite interesting. Let's start with the standard benchmarks that I usually do. So AIDA 64 Extreme Edition CPU went up to 80 degrees, while the clock speed was 5300 megahertz. Cinebench with multi-thread and 10 passes. What I usually do is the thermals on this processor were from 80 to 81. Basically, somewhere average was 80.5, and the clock speed was 5300 megahertz. Throughout those 10 tests, we had 40,006, then it went down to 39,700, something like that. And the last 5 were actually quite stable above 40,000, with the last one being 40,749. Now, if we take average out of those 10 benchmarks, we get 40,252 Cinebench score, which definitely surpasses its older score on the Z890 Tomahawk and comes much closer to i9 4900K. The single thread score is also higher, because on the Tomahawk it was 2288, here we have 2329, which I do have to say, again, quite interesting. Going with the Indigo benchmark, we have 3.350 million samples per second compared to 3.341, and for the supercar we got 8.576 million samples per second, while the original score was 8.589. So here we have a bit of a difference, but regardless of that, it's quite interesting to see the difference between two boards. Now for Corona 10, 12,711,000 rays per second. This is definitely higher than on the Z890 Tomahawk. Corona 1.3, this is something else. This is completely different. In this scenario, we had 47 seconds, which follows back behind the original testing with the Tomahawk board, but still better than the AMD Ryzen 9 7900X3D, still slower than i7 14700K in this scenario, with 10.161,300 rays per second. 3D Mark CPU profile, the initial start with the maximum cores was 18,852, which is way higher than on the original testing that I did. And then we go with 16 cores, definitely higher. This trend almost follows at 8 threads. 4 threads is something similar, 2 threads quite close, and 1 thread, single thread, is basically just a bit difference, nothing drastical. But max threads and 16 threads is definitely going up high. Now 3D Mark. In TimeSpy, and you'll see the difference quite closely. So we have TimeSpy Extreme, 11,962, CPU was 13,341. TimeSpy 22,813, CPU was 17,364, Firestrike Ultra 14,945, Physics score 55,576, while the combined score was 8,183, Firestrike Extreme 26,802, Physics score 49,405, and combined score 12,020. Then we continue with Firestrike, the normal one, 40,774, Physics score 55,452, and combined score 14,952. In PC Mark 10, it definitely outperforms the past benchmarks with 9,635 points, Essentials 11,961, Productivity 11,519, and Digital Content Creation 17,615. A bit more information, we have Geekbench 6, single thread score was 3231, multi-thread score 20,531. POV 0.71 seconds to finish the render, and then we skip to AIDA64 cache and memory test. Kingston Fury Renegade 2 times 16 7600 MHz. Read speeds 116.47 gigabytes per second. Write speed was 100.1 gigabytes per second, and copy was 103.86 gigabytes per second with latency 81.2 nanoseconds. This is great. AIDA64 AES 256, the score was 251,932 megabytes per second. Now, in benchmarks, it continued, and now I'm doubting the SSD being all used up, but then I go to Crystal Benchmark and I get the regular scores. So I'm using Kingston KC3000, 4 terabytes. AS SSD, read 5860 with write 5823. Out of this benchmark, read 6.53 gigabytes, write 6.32 gigabytes. And Crystal Disk Mark, 7,000 megabytes per second read and almost 6,700 megabytes per second write, which kind of makes sense, right? And now, taking everything into consideration, when we check out the benchmarks and compare the Z890 Steel Legend Wi-Fi compared to the Tomahawk Wi-Fi, you get two boards that are good, but this one apparently is, in some benchmarks, so much better in performance. I didn't update anything. There wasn't any patch or, I don't know, some update regarding the CPU or anything similar to that. But I think the VRMs and everything that helps this board in general with the pass-through communication and altogether, maybe it was, I don't know, it was almost the same. The only difference was the GPU. So yeah, that kind of goes in play. But all in all, quite satisfied with this board. If you're really looking for something that will pair up with your Intel Core Ultra processors, if you're going with those, of course, definitely. Of course, it has to pair up with the color scheme as well, because if you're buying a high-end PC build, it either has to be something that looks quite nice, or you're just going to chuck it somewhere so you don't care, whatever. But honestly, this board really does perform quite nicely. And I'm quite curious because I have one more ASRock Z890 board sitting right there, and it needs to be tested as well, which will be coming quite shortly as soon as I finish up the benchmarks and all the other videos that I have planned prior. But it's going to be quite interesting to compare three Z890 motherboards with Intel Core Ultra 9285K. Just amazed at this point that this board actually does do great job. So great speeds on the RAMs, outstanding scores on everything else compared to the past tests that I did on the other board, and quite cool design, quite cool features as well. We have Wi-Fi 7, we have 2.5G, okay, we have that on the past gen as well, but regardless, we have interesting XXL VRM heatsinks for better cooling for the VRMs, and we also have these heatsinks for the M.2, which are easy removable. The only thing, and it stays obviously the same, is the ASRock Polychrome sync, which, as you can see right here, doesn't sync the RAMs properly when we're talking about that. Maybe it's because ASRock Polychrome sync collides with other addressable RGB or RGB software that is inside on my SSD, but it is what it is. Every motherboard manufacturer needs to upgrade their game on the software to have everything working properly. But let's be honest, as for ASRock Polychrome Sync, the only issue are the RAMs, nothing else. Everything else that is connected to 3-pin 5 volts connector works properly, and you can see that right here. If you're looking for a good motherboard or a great motherboard for Intel Core Ultra whatever, because I think it would be outperformed. It would outperform the Z890 Tomahawk even with the Ultra 5 254K. So I'll put the link in the description below, and I'll place the CPU if you want to pair it up. And finally, leave a comment if you have some additional questions. And don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, click the notification bell. See you quite soon, guys. Bye-bye.